and welcome to ClockTower Game Studios. Today I'm going to be working on a new project, probably the start of a new series. I'm going to try and condense it down into as few videos as possible, cutting out some of the basic construction since most of the techniques I'll be using for that I covered in the Koban build. This is the piece of art that's sort of inspired part of what I'm doing. It's a subway station or a tram station from an urban environment. Sadly, I don't know who originally built this. It looks like it's a railroad scale model. I found it on Pinterest. Sadly, I have no idea who the artist is. If anybody that happens to see this knows who the artist is, please let me know in the comments, and I'll make sure to update the description with the proper credits. But anyway, that was the inspiration I used for the initial building, and here I'm just going to sketch it out a little bit. So, like I said, I'm going to condense this down into as few videos as possible. So rather than going through the whole process of designing and everything and building every single thing on camera, I'm just going to touch on what I think are the important or the interesting parts. And in particular for this video, I'm going to focus on stairs. But before we dig into that, let's talk about the initial building just a little bit more. So I'm designing this to be modular. I want the top floor where the train station would normally be in the example art I found. I want to make that modular so I can either put a rail station up there if I want, or I can make it just a normal building roof if I want to do that, put like a rooftop garden on there similar to what I did on the Koban, just larger. Or I want to be able to swap it out so it can have different like helipads, or in this case, I remembered that I had some junk laying around and decided to go find some inspiration and see what I had in the junk drawer. So one of the most common things in our hobby, and something that I can't stress enough that everybody should do, is keep a box and set of drawers or whatever space you've got that'll allow for it. Keep a bunch of interesting shaped trash. I know that sounds weird, but upcycling is a big way to get free or cheap materials for this hobby. And in particular, I like to save things like any kind of interesting textured materials like plastic sheets or something from packaging that has like a diamond material on it, like some cookie or cracker wrappers, interesting shaped bottles, anything that I know if I wanted to create a compound shape, especially curves and domes, those are really hard to create from scratch. So being able to source that from trash that you might have laying around, from normal household items. The inspiration I ended up pulling for part of this was a shampoo bottle. And when I found this bottle, I remembered that there was a specific piece of art I had found on Pinterest, originating with an artist named Space Goose, who designs spacecraft out of everyday objects found around the house. And I really liked the art for it, and it was a really easy to get a hold of item, so I decided to make sure I kept at least one of these around. So I'm going to be designing the top floor of this building, specifically, at least this version of it, specifically in mind to have this spacecraft mounted up there. So since I've got my bottle and I know exactly how long that needs to be, I'm going to just kind of plan out how long exactly the roof section needs to be and then start working on my stairs from there. So I've got in mind I want to put a storefront under it and then stairs that go up. Originally I planned to do it both sides, but because of how I decided to do the stairs, I only ended up doing one corner. So as you're exploring how to build and make this sort of terrain, especially like sci-fi modern terrain, or even some more realistic fantasy buildings, you'll find that it's really easy to wing a lot of the external structures, and most of the structures in general. It's really easy to just kind of make it up as you go. The one part that I find that actually takes a lot of planning are stairs, especially if you're going to be doing playable stairs. So there's a couple considerations to take whenever you really start building or designing a set of stairs for minigaming. One, do you want them to be functional or to scale? And what I mean by that is, oftentimes for our miniatures, if you build a stairwell that's to scale and looks right next to the model for like an interior stairwell, it's going to be too small to actually play on. The rises and the actual steps are going to be too small to actually set a model on its base. A normal base size is around an inch wide, 25 mil, And normal, like to scale, if you did that, a normal tread on a set of stairs is like 9 inches. So in scale, that would make it something in the neighborhood of like 3 or 4 mil. Definitely not enough to stack a mini on. So the solution to this is you have to either build to have the model look like the model of the stairs look like they're going to be in scale, or build them to where they're playable. So I have chosen for this round to build playable stairs, since it's on the exterior of the building and I can build it to where it wraps all the way around the building. This isn't a design that's really that uncommon. Really shallow, long stairwells will work just fine for this sort of thing. So the next thing to figure out is your rise over the distance you have to get there. So what I mean by that is I know that my first layer of the terrain, the first floor, is 3 inches tall. And the run, or how far it has to go, will depend on how many of my 1-inch steps it takes to get that high. So the height of each layer of my foam core, which is what I'm using for my steps, is around 5 millimeters. So roughly speaking, it's going to take me 5 pieces of foam core to go up 1 inch. So it's going to take me a total of 15 pieces of foam core to go up the 3 inches. So then I start drawing that out. And what I know is I want my tread, each step, to be 1 inch wide so a mini can stand on it. So as I'm doing that, I realized that my original idea for the model, where I was going to put a stairway going up on each side, one for like an entrance, one for an exit, or one for onboarding, one for deboarding, wasn't going to work. So what I decided would end up being done, since this wasn't going to work going all the way around both sides, was along the front it needed to go up 10 steps, and then up the side it needed to go up another 5. So what I did is I went up to a small platform, and then that was the corner piece, and then from that kind of landing it went up the rest of the way. So that was my final plan. Now I ended up screwing up, and I should have gone up the full 10 along the front and then had the 5 steps up the side, but I messed that up, but I ended up fixing it in the end. There was a bad measurement because I decided at the last minute to add the landing in the corner instead of having like a weird corner step. So that was my fault, and it ended up working out okay. It just needed to change things a little bit towards the end of the build. Now this isn't the only way to build stairs. I've built other stairwells in the past, and this is a work in progress building that I've had laying around, but haven't had time or the materials I needed to finish yet. But as you can see, I built a spiral staircase that had shorter steps, and the landings on it are playable, but the actual treads between steps aren't. For gameplay, that's really not a huge deal. It'll still work fine, but this one I wanted the entire thing top to bottom to be playable, and I wanted it to go all the way around. So at this point I've got the back wall and one of the sides, the side that'll be the sort of outer edge of the stairwell on the corner edge there, the short edge. I've got both of those glued into place, and I've got the interior wall there put in place too. So off screen I went ahead and I cut up all of the treads I needed, and I made those 1.25 inches. That way they'd overlap by 1/4 inch, so they'd be more solid when I went to glue them. And once I got those cut up, I just take my time and start stacking them up and gluing them into place so they will pile up and make my steps. So how I've decided to make this structure is I'm going to glue my treads in place, and then I'm going to use foam core scrap from previous projects and offcuts to kind of make the substructure that's going to hold it all together. So as you can see, each layer of foam core that I stack up underneath the tread is just the same thickness as the actual tread. So in theory, just going up, it should be fine. So my only regret with doing it this way is that I come to discover about 3/4 of the way through the project that not all of my scrap was from the same brand of foam core, and some of the thickness varied slightly. So like the dollar store foam core is a little bit thinner than the Elmer's brand foam core, and I had another brand that I couldn't identify that was in there that had one side was a tan color and the other side was white, but that had a different thickness to it too. It's like the cardstock used on both sides was a different thickness, and that in one layer isn't too bad, but when you get towards the end of the project and there's 15 or so layers of foam that you're building up, it really starts to add up and can throw off some of your steps. So some of mine didn't turn out being completely level. Because of how I'm building mine, that didn't end up being that big of a deal, but it was something that I wish I would have noticed earlier and taken steps to correct. That way I'd have just used the same foam core for all of it. Here towards the end, it started to get a little more intricate. So what I was doing is I cut up sort of some small sections of foam core, and I started gluing them 3 to 5 high, depending on how much space I was trying to fill. And once I'd had small pillars built, I would glue like a cross member to help add some sort of stability from side to side to each tier of the model for each tread. So that was kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm making these small pillars, and then I'm going to attach the cross member to them, and then I just pile those up all the way up the back side here. That way the entire structure has a little more strength to it and is a little more solid. So here, coming up to the end, this is where I realized that I had made a mistake and I hadn't left room for my last step. So I'm sort of improvising. So I decided that I'm going to include that back wall there, the sort of interior wall, as part of that, the next step up. And I'm going to cut and put a tread right there on the very top of the last landing I had included. So my original plan, like I said, was this landing should have been flush with what would be the roof, the top of that back piece of foam core there, the back wall. But I made a mistake, so here I'm just going to fix it. And this is fairly typical with any project. Things, of course, end up with problems here and there. Just work with them. Usually it's not the end of the world, and you can find a solution that's satisfactory. After resolving that issue, I decided the next step was I needed to trim down that back wall, the side panel there, to make room for the railing that I want. What I decided is I wanted my railing, the cardstock railing I'm going to be building, to go all the way around this, and I want it to be an inch higher than the tread at the leading edge of each tread. After finishing it, I'm not sure that's what I want, and I may go back and trim it down 1/4 inch all the way around. But what I'm doing here is I'm cutting that at an angle to make room for that pattern. After getting the foam core cut down to where I wanted it, the next thing to do was to put the cardstock railings in place and prop them up and let the glue set. So here I just get the cardstock glued on, propped in place, and sort of almost clamped, and just let it sit until it dries. And I do that around all 3 sides. After it's had a chance to set, you can see here the finished product with the railing and everything in place, with some test models to kind of get an idea for scale. Here you can see what I mean by the railing being a little too tall. The smaller 28mm, more true 28mm scale models can barely see over it. So I'm probably going to go back through and cut that down a little bit, make it a little more playable. It just needs to be a little bit shorter, so I might take 1/4 inch off. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video and it was informative and maybe even inspirational in some way, and you can use what you've learned here in your own hobby pursuits. Be sure to come back next time. I'm going to be going over how I use Tinkercad to design and print off building parts. I'm going to go back through and do some window frames and maybe a couple of magazine racks for the interior of the building next time. So if you want to see that, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you get notified whenever that video goes live. Also, be sure to check out our other social media outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Right now, we currently have a poll going on those for an upcoming video. Callie and I have decided we're going to do a painting competition. We've designed a couple minis using Hero Forge, and you guys get to vote on which ones we're going to be painting. So check us out on Facebook. The links to those posts will all be in the description below, so you can look them up. go vote, and we're going to pick out the 2 winning models to paint. We're going to print off 2 copies of each of them, and then we're going to paint them up on camera for a video later in the month, and you guys will get to vote on who wins the painting competition too. So we're looking forward to that. So go check out our social media and vote on that. Also, if you enjoyed the videos, be sure to like and share it. Spread the word about the channel and the company. I'd be happy to have your friends watching as well. If you'd like, please support us at Buy Me a Coffee. You just tip a couple bucks, buys us some coffee here and there, and that's always enjoyable. So thanks very much if you do that. Of course, you could also support us on Patreon, where we have monthly content based on our current game in development, S.E.E.R. Subscribing to that gets you instant access to the S.E.E.R playtest rules, as well as monthly polls for what the content coming up should be about, short stories and scenarios based in the fiction for the game. Also, you can support us in another way by buying from our Amazon affiliate links in the description below. You'll be able to buy the stuff you'd already be using, the same price you'd always buy it at. We just get a little bit of a kickback for referring you. So thank you very much for watching the video. Hopefully, like I said, you've enjoyed it. And remember, at the Clock Tower, it's always game time.